I've been reviewing my videos, and I noticed of all my recent videos, the one that garnered the most views and the most attention was the video I made on Sadiq Khan's comments about Scottish nationalism. In that video, I was arguing that Mr. Khan's only mistake was retracting his comments. He had compared Scottish nationalism to the sort of populism espoused by Trump and others. Um, Now, to be fair, Mr. Khan wasn't saying it is exactly the same as Trump's populism. Obviously, there's big differences. Trump is a very right wing American populist. He's president of the United States. So there's a lot of differences. But I think it's quite clear that what Mr. Khan was tapping into is the sectarianism of Scottish nationalism, and this is irrefutable. Um, I think his only mistake was apologising. I don't think he should have retracted it. I mean, with respect, Mr. Mayor, if you're going to say something like that, stick to your guns. Um, and here's the thing: I don't think when I say sectarianism, I'm not talking about Catholic Protestant sectarianism. That certainly is an issue in Scotland, slightly lesser than it is in Ulster, but it's an issue. But that isn't the sectarianism of Scottish nationalism. The sectarianism they have is dividing Scots into Unionists and Nationalists, and they're the ones who are creating this division. Because in their very petty mind, Scots who voted no in 2014 are traitors. This isn't something that I've just made up or am paranoid about. All you have to do is look at a nationalist forum to see this. You know, Nicola Sturgeon, at her level, she has to be diplomatic. She has to be very careful in her words. She's a skilled politician. She knows how to do that. So it's not the top rank of the SNP that is a problem. It is the base, not even of the SNP, but of more extreme nationalist elements. Thugs like Wings Over Scotland, and I have no problem calling them that because these people have indicated they're prepared to use violence. They've indicated that they are prepared to sow up hatred against Unionist Scots. Now, they will always refute we don't hate the English. Here's the thing: I don't think every Scottish nationalist does hate the English. Indeed, there's some English that support Scottish nationalism, and they're always very quick to say that. And I don't think they all, I don't think all Scottish nationals hate the English or the Welsh or the Northern Irish. However, it is absolutely irrefutable, and Billy Connolly made this point, that there is a very deep seated xenophobia at the heart of Scottish nationalism. So just because, the polite face of Scottish nationalism doesn't show this, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So the very defensive attitude they took following on from Mr. Khan's remarks was a little bit pathetic because actually there's a lot of basis to that. Like I say, just look at Scottish Nationalist Forum. I'm not even talking about SNP, I'm talking about the more hardcore elements. Now, you could say that you'll find extreme aspects in every political movement, but I would argue, in the case of Scottish nationalism, it's quite widespread. I don't believe we're talking about a very small contingent here. I think it's quite a large vocal contingent, and it is a very ugly thing. I mean, what I find absolutely insufferable is their utter contempt for democracy and the arrogance, the sheer bloody arrogance of playing the victim, saying we're the ones being hard done by because of Brexit. Brexit, I am convinced, as days go on, that it's a convenient excuse for the nationalists. I'm convinced that they'd be pushing for independence regardless of Brexit. If there'd been no EU referendum held last year, they'd be pushing for independence. So the fact the result didn't go their way is kind of a convenient excuse. The fact of the matter is there are many unionists who also voted Remain, including myself. I voted to stay in the EU. I was disappointed by the result. But I am not as disappointed by that as I would be with the breakup of this United Kingdom, this country. And what these nationalists are doing is creating deep-seated division in Scotland. They're the ones doing this. I don't know how they can get off on calling unionists divisive when they're the ones pushing for yet another referendum. Think about that. They're pushing and pushing and pushing until they get exactly what they want. They're like petulant brats. And it's, they just show their utter contempt for democracy by ignoring the will of the 2 million Scots who voted no in 2014. I just can't, I just cannot see how anyone could argue that is an acceptable situation. And there seems to be collective amnesia of what happened in 2014, as if that referendum meant nothing. It was months of sometimes bitter campaigning. Now, who wants to revisit that? I suspect there's even nationalists don't particularly want a referendum right now. So I find myself in increasing contempt for what they are doing. I try to rise above hating individuals. I don't hate Nicola Sturgeon. I don't much like her, and I certainly don't like her politics. But it's not the people I hate. It's this divisiveness that they're stirring up, and that's what they are doing. And I just don't know how they can play the victim. As for this perverse idea that they're slaves of the British Empire, number one, the British Empire is gone. So let's just drop that one. And I'm not exaggerating, that is how they see themselves. Number two, Scotland under the United Kingdom has seen its greatest moments. I mean, the Scottish Enlightenment was in the 1820s under the United Kingdom. 7 prime ministers of this country have been Scottish, numerous others of Scottish descent. Now, does that really sound like an oppressed people? An oppressed people whose native sons can rise to the highest office in the land? Think about that. Does that really make sense? I don't think so. I mean, what they are doing is creating division for years to come. And what concerns me is what an independent Scotland would actually look like. What sort of nation would it be? Because the impression I'm getting so far is it would be a very, very narrow thinking nation. I mean, what is going to happen to unionists in an independent Scotland? They're already being called traitors, not by those at the top, but by a sizable contingent of the base. This is a simple fact. And I will admit, that there are probably some unsavoury aspects of unionism as well. I mean, people will be tempted to pigeonhole me because of my Ulster background. They'll be tempted to say I'm a bigot against Catholics, or the problem is if you're from Northern Ireland, there's this kind of stereotype, especially if you're Ulster-Scots, which I more or less consider myself to be. There's this kind of stereotype that you're a narrow-minded orange type Paisley worshipping Catholic hater. I'm none of those things actually. I've never been involved in the Orange Lodge. Um, I wasn't a big fan of Ian Paisley. I've always grown up with a relatively liberal background. I've travelled the world. I've friends from all backgrounds, including Catholic friends. And I'm just saying that to dispel any notions, misconceptions about myself. But I'm not going to apologise for being passionate in my defence of this United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is my country. And this idea the nationalists have, that they're the only ones allowed an opinion, that's what they believe, is disgusting, quite frankly. It's undemocratic, it's very illiberal, and it's kind of a window into what an independent Scotland might look like. Now, nationalists will contort it's not only the SNP want independence, the Scottish Greens do, and like I say, there are more extreme groups like Wings Over Scotland. But what's going to happen to the Scottish Conservatives, Scottish Labour, Scottish Liberal Democrats? If they get elected out of office, okay, that's politics. But we are now seeing a situation where anyone even associated with those parties, anyone who votes for those parties, is being branded a traitor. And it is, if you want an example of how this is working, what the Nationalists are doing is kind of forcing the Unionist parties to really fight among themselves to prove that they're not. So, for example, Scottish Labour and Scottish Liberal Democrats, if they don't come out and say they hate the Tories, then they're going to be labelled Westminster Stooges. It's this lemon us mentality that they have. And it's such utter bullshit. I mean, I don't think of people as Scots and English, you know. So when I see these comments like "free us from the tyranny of Westminster, Swar Alba," I just I feel almost pity because it must be difficult waking up in a country that you absolutely hate, and they've convinced themselves that they are somehow prisoners. Never mind the fact they can say whatever they want. Freedom of expression is guaranteed in Scotland. At least it is now under the United Kingdom. And they can vote for whoever they want. Devolved powers are there in almost every policy area. I mean, it's just a complete. It depresses me and angers me and frustrates me that they are still pushing this. I don't know how anyone can rationally say that there is a greater cause for another divisive referendum now than there was in 2014 when that decision was made clear. And it wasn't a close run thing. It wasn't. It's not like, if I use a boxing scenario, it's not like two guys have a really, really close fight and then there has to be a rematch. That was not close. We're talking 300,000 votes difference, in a nation of just 5.2 million. And it was a very high turnout as well. In other words, it was a very strong indicator. Um, I don't know what's going to happen with Brexit. I don't know if there's a possibility in the future that we could rejoin the EU. I don't know how that's going to pan out. I don't particularly want a hard Brexit. But Theresa May was right when she said that they seem to care more about a 40-year-old union than a 300, in fact, 400-year-old union. Now, does that really make sense? Scottish nationalism is divisive at its core. And I don't know how anyone could argue that it isn't. Unionism, by its very definition, isn't divisive. Unionism, it's an adjective to unite, unify, the United Kingdom. So I'm sick of this shit. I'm sick of hearing it. And I really, really hope they lose seats. I really hope the SNP and the Scottish Greens lose seats in these coming elections. Obviously, if they lose seats, that lessens their influence. And I would politely suggest to nationalists, do yourselves a favour. This isn't going to happen. All you're going to do is end up seething with hatred and rage at the wicked United Kingdom. Just try thinking about things different. I'm not even asking you to like this country, but you're living in it. I mean, I can't contemplate what it's like to live in a country that you hate. And these people really do hate the UK. They may not hate the English, but they hate the UK. There's absolutely no question about that. And just one final point. People may wonder why I block comments on these videos related to this issue. I'll be quite frank about this. Frankly, the future of this country is too important for me to kind of humour the etiquette of providing them with a platform for spouting out their garbage. I mean, they could say, oh, I'm attacking free speech. Most of my videos are I allow comments. On this issue, it's too personal to me, quite frankly. This is not some abstract issue that, oh, I have an opinion on, then move on to the next subject. It's like it's like my arm. I'm not going to chop off my arm and then, not feel it. This is very personal to me. That's why I don't want to give them a platform. They have plenty of other platforms. They can make their own videos. Now, some might say I'm being intolerant, but the situation now in Scotland is that they are creating intolerance by trying to silence unionists. So why should I give them a platform? I do take this very personally, and I think the country matters more than anything. including the perception of, you know, tolerance by giving them a platform on my channel. Now, if I was a broadcaster, if I was an elected politician or something like that, I'd probably allow the comments because obviously that would be very risky not to do so. But as a private individual, I can make that choice. It's my channel. The United Kingdom is precious to me, and I'm under no obligation to let them, push their hateful propaganda, which is what it really is. And I'll leave it there. Some might say I should be happy because we are still the United Kingdom and it's unlikely that this will happen. But I'm not happy. I'm unhappy at the divisions that they are creating, and I'm unhappy with the constant uncertainty that they are sowing. And how anyone could say it's the unionists causing this is absurd. It's not the unionists who are pushing for another referendum. It's not even like the unionists are pushing for a referendum asking, should the UK stay together, or a question that can be perceived as pro-union. The unionists just want peace. They just want us to get on with things. I mean, if I was in Scotland, I would be far more concerned about crime and the NHS and all those issues than this vanity project of trying to get independence. It's a very dangerous thing for politicians to do, to make these grand promises without giving any sort of guarantees about what is going to follow. And anyone who questions that is branded archaic. It's the Nationals who are being archaic because they're the ones who want to bring us back centuries. And I'll leave it there.